What if one of the most widely quoted spiritual texts of the last century isn't ancient at all? For more than 100 years, the Kybalion has been held up as a kind of lost wisdom from ancient Egypt and Greece, a sacred transmission from mysterious adepts. It's quoted in self-help books, spiritual podcasts, and countless YouTube channels as if it were the very foundation of Hermetic philosophy. But what if it's not what we think it is? What if it's more self-help with a mystical makeover than the deep soul science it claims to be? In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain, not to mock or dismiss the people who find meaning in the Kybalion, but to help you see it with clearer eyes. We'll explore its real origins, the places where it strays from authentic Hermetic teaching, and most importantly, how its ideas might be quietly limiting your spiritual growth without you even realizing it. Because here's the paradox. The Kybalion does contain pieces of truth. But half-truths can be more dangerous than outright lies. They can make you feel like you've reached the summit, when really, you're still standing at the base of the mountain. And if you've ever felt like you've hit a ceiling in your spiritual practice, this might be why. When you open the Kybalion, the first thing you'll see is that it's by 3 initiates. No names, no credentials, just the aura of secrecy that makes it feel like you're about to read something hidden from the world for centuries. But here's the truth. The Kybalion wasn't dug up from an Egyptian tomb. It wasn't preserved by temple priests. It was published in Chicago in 1908, during a time when America was swept up in a new kind of spiritual fad. Most scholars now agree the main author was William Walker Atkinson, a prolific writer in the New Thought movement. New Thought was an early 20th century blend of Christian Science, transcendentalism, and an unwavering belief in the power of the mind to shape reality. Atkinson himself wrote on everything from mental healing to personal magnetism, often under multiple pen names. He was a businessman as much as a mystic. This was also the era of theosophy and the mental science boom, movements that borrowed freely from Eastern religions, Western occultism, and modern psychology to create teachings that felt ancient, even if they were freshly invented. People craved wisdom that could be both mystical and practical, something that promised self-mastery without requiring the rigors of old initiatory traditions. That's the environment in which the Kybalion was born. Its 7 Hermetic principles weren't passed down in secret halls. They were assembled in the spirit of turn-of-the-century self-improvement. The ideas of mentalism, vibration, and polarity were already circulating in New Thought circles, and Atkinson wove them together with a Hermetic-sounding vocabulary to give them an air of timeless authority. And this is where the first major misunderstanding begins. The word Hermetic refers to the teachings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, mystical writings from the Greco-Egyptian world, recorded between the 2nd and 4th centuries CE. These texts are deeply philosophical, devotional, and initiatory. They're about the soul's ascent to the divine, not about using your thoughts to change your circumstances. But in 1908, most readers had no way to fact-check that. Without widespread access to the actual Corpus Hermeticum or scholarly commentary, the Kybalion could easily pass as the real thing. Its tone was confident, its structure was neat, and its promises were appealing. And so the myth took root that this was a genuine crystallization of ancient wisdom. Yet when you look closer, the fingerprints of the New Thought era are everywhere. The emphasis on mind over matter mirrors Christian Science teachings. The call to master your reality echoes the popular prosperity gospel mindset emerging in America. Even the idea of universal laws that you can learn and apply like a spiritual toolkit is far more American self-help than Alexandrian mysticism. Understanding these origins doesn't make the Kybalion worthless, but it does strip away the illusion that it's an unaltered voice from the ancient world. And that's important because when we confuse modern inventions for timeless truths, we risk building our spiritual lives on foundations that were never meant to hold that much weight. Once we peel back the Kybalion's modern origins, a natural question emerges. If this isn't authentic Hermeticism, then what is? To answer that, we have to step away from the tidy motivational language of 1908 Chicago and travel back to the world of late antiquity, Alexandria, Egypt, where Greek philosophy, Egyptian religion, and early mystical traditions were mixing in a way the world had never seen before. Here, between roughly the 2nd and 4th centuries CE, a body of writings known as the Hermetica began to take shape. The most famous of these are the Corpus Hermeticum and the Asclepius. They weren't self-help manuals. They were initiatory dialogues, intense poetic conversations between Hermes Trismegistus, who was a teacher and a student, grappling with the mysteries of the soul, the divine, and the cosmos. In these texts, you don't find a list of 7 principles. Instead, you find a living philosophy centered on gnosis, direct inner knowledge of the divine. The aim wasn't to master reality, but to awaken from ignorance and remember our true origin in the divine mind, or nous. This awakening was seen as the soul's liberation from the material realm, not as a way to attract wealth or bend circumstances to personal will. Real Hermeticism is mystical, devotional, and paradoxical. It's less about controlling the world and more about transcending the illusion that the world is separate from God. In the Corpus Hermeticum, Hermes says, "If you do not make yourself equal to God, you cannot understand God. Like is understood by like." This isn't about inflating the ego. It's about transformation so deep that the soul's very nature changes. That's why Hermeticism was historically linked to alchemy, astrology, and sacred ritual. These weren't tools for personal gain, they were symbolic maps for purifying the self and aligning with cosmic order. In contrast, the Kybalion distills Hermetic-sounding ideas into neatly packaged concepts like mentalism and polarity. The complexity of nous, the divine intelligence that permeates everything, gets reduced to "all is mind," a phrase that sounds profound but often stays on the surface. True Hermeticism invites a lifetime of contemplation and initiation. The Kybalion offers something you can apply right away, but with far less depth. Another key difference is the role of mystery. Authentic Hermetic texts are filled with riddles, symbols, and poetic contradictions. They don't hand you clean-cut formulas because spiritual awakening isn't linear or formulaic. It's an unfolding, an initiation that often requires surrender into the unknown. By understanding what real Hermeticism is and what it isn't, we begin to see why mistaking the Kybalion for the genuine article can narrow our path instead of expanding it. When a tradition built for soul transformation is replaced by a simplified mental philosophy, we risk trading an open door to the infinite for a tidy, decorated room that never leads beyond itself. When the Kybalion takes the vast poetic mystery of Hermeticism and reduces it to 7 Hermetic principles, it's already doing something the original tradition never did, codifying mystical insight into a fixed checklist. These principles, mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender, are presented as the timeless keys to understanding the universe. The problem? None of them in this exact form appear in any ancient Hermetic writings. You can comb through the Corpus Hermeticum, the Asclepius, or related alchemical and Gnostic texts, you won't find them laid out like this. That's because these are not ancient doctrines. They're early 20th century syntheses, built from concepts floating around in New Thought, Theosophy, and popular occultism of the time. And while they borrow some language that sounds Hermetic, they're reframed for a mindset that values immediate application and personal empowerment over lifelong initiation. Take the first principle, mentalism. The Kybalion's all is mind teaches that everything in existence is a mental creation, which can lead to the belief that mastering your thoughts is the master key to reality. But in classical Hermeticism, the divine mind, otherwise known as nous, is not your individual mind. It's the infinite intelligence that births and sustains the cosmos. Recognizing it isn't about manifesting a parking spot. It's about mystical union with the source of all being. Then there's polarity. In the Kybalion, it's explained through pairs of opposites, hot and cold, light and dark, implying that understanding and shifting between poles is a way to master conditions. Ancient Hermeticism, however, was not a dualistic framework. It aimed at transcending all apparent opposites to return to the unity beneath them. Polarity in the Kybalion becomes a management tool. In true Hermeticism, polarity dissolves in the light of gnosis. Cause and effect is another revealing example. The Kybalion frames it almost like a spiritual law of physics. Everything has a cause, and by understanding causes, you can control outcomes. This aligns with the deterministic optimism of New Thought, but it risks flattening spiritual reality into a predictable machine. Ancient Hermeticism saw causality as part of the cosmic order, yes, but also understood that divine mystery is not bound by human logic. The purpose wasn't control, but alignment with that deeper order. Even the principle of gender in the Kybalion reflects the early 1900s fascination with binary masculine-feminine forces in all things. In Hermetic texts, while metaphors of father and mother do appear, they are symbolic of creative processes within the divine, not fixed categories to be balanced for personal mastery. The danger here isn't that these ideas are entirely wrong. They're often insightful. The danger is mistaking them for the whole picture. When you believe the 7 principles are the entire Hermetic path, you may stop seeking the depths that the original tradition invites you into. And that means you could end up with a spiritual framework that's tidy, empowering, and quietly incomplete. When a system like the Kybalion presents itself as the complete key to universal truth, it can feel empowering at first. You have rules you can memorize, principles you can apply, and a framework that promises mastery. But in spiritual psychology, there's a shadow side to this kind of certainty. It can narrow your growth without you realizing it. One of the biggest risks is over-mentalization. If all is mind is taken to mean that every experience, every feeling, and every event is purely a mental construct, you might start living entirely in your head. Ancient mystery traditions honored the body as part of the spiritual journey through purification, ritual, and deep embodied practice. But the Kybalion's mentalist lens can lead to ignoring the wisdom in physical sensation, emotion, and even trauma. You can't think your way into wholeness if your body and emotions are being bypassed. That leads to the second danger, spiritual bypassing. If you believe your reality is entirely a product of your thoughts, pain stops being a valid experience to move through. It becomes a manifestation error to fix. Someone grieving might be told they're vibrating too low or attracting misfortune. In this worldview, suffering isn't a call to deeper transformation. It's a sign you're doing spirituality wrong. This not only adds shame to the pain, it can prevent genuine healing. Another subtle trap is ego empowerment disguised as soul mastery. The Kybalion's framing often emphasizes control over circumstances, over mental states, over polarity. While discipline is valuable, the mystical path also demands surrender, humility, and letting go of control entirely. A constant focus on mastery can feed the ego's need to feel in charge, leaving little room for the soul's deeper transformation, which often unfolds in mystery and vulnerability. Then there's transactional spirituality. The 7 principles can be applied like tools. Use vibration to attract what you want. Use cause and effect to influence outcomes. Use correspondence to hack reality. But genuine Hermeticism and most initiatory traditions are not about getting results. They're about becoming someone new. When spirituality is reduced to techniques for personal gain, the emphasis shifts from awakening to acquisition. Take the law of vibration as an example. In the Kybalion's context, it often gets used to justify avoiding negative emotions to maintain a high frequency. But in real spiritual growth, facing grief, anger, or despair is not a detour, it's part of the path. Avoidance only drives these energies deeper into the unconscious, where they shape our lives in ways we can't see. The truth is, when you treat the Kybalion as the whole map, you might reach a certain plateau where you're skilled at applying mental principles, but untouched by the deeper alchemy that transforms the soul. It's like mastering the rules of a game that was never meant to be played at all, because the real journey begins when you step off the board entirely. Once you step outside the boundaries of the Kybalion, you begin to see just how vast the spiritual landscape really is. The modern mentalist framework of the 7 principles is only a fraction of what the ancient world offered. To walk a more authentic path, it helps to revisit the traditions that actually shaped Hermetic thought and the many streams that run alongside it. Let's begin with the Corpus Hermeticum itself. These texts speak of nous, or the divine mind, not as a personal tool for shaping reality, but as the very fabric of existence. The goal isn't to master nous, but to awaken to your oneness with it. This awakening is described as an inner resurrection, where the soul sheds ignorance and remembers its divine origin. The tone is devotional and transformative, not transactional. Then there's alchemy, which most people know only through its outer symbols, turning lead into gold. In the ancient Hermetic alchemical context, this was never about literal metalwork. It was a metaphor for the soul's transformation, purifying the dense, unconscious aspects of the self into the radiant gold of divine consciousness. This process wasn't quick or easy. It demanded patience, discipline, and surrender to forces beyond the rational mind. Beyond Hermeticism, we find mystical Christianity, which inherited and transformed many Hermetic ideas. The writings of early Christian mystics speak of divine union, purification, and illumination, 3 stages of the soul's ascent. The language differs, but the essence is the same. Spirituality is not a system you control, but a surrender to love that changes you from the inside out. In Sufism, the Islamic mystical path, there is the concept of fana, the annihilation of the ego in the presence of God. This mirrors Hermeticism's call to dissolve the self into the divine mind. The seeker's journey involves poetry, music, movement, and deep devotion, practices that awaken the heart, not just the intellect. Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition, also shares this initiatory structure. Its symbolic tree of life maps the stages of the soul's return to its source, weaving together cosmic principles, sacred language, and the deep work of refining one's inner being. Again, there are no 7 easy steps, only a living map that you must experience to understand. What all these traditions have in common is that they refuse to be reduced to simple formulas. They offer mirrors instead of manuals, riddles instead of rules. They invite you into mystery, transformation, and direct encounter with the sacred. This is the real heritage of Hermeticism. Not a fixed set of mental laws, but a living, evolving path that engages every part of you, mind, body, heart, and soul. When you choose this more ancient way, you exchange the safety of certainty for the exhilaration of the unknown. And in doing so, you align yourself with the same impulse that moved the seekers of Alexandria, the mystics of Persia, and the alchemists of the Renaissance, the longing to touch the infinite. The Kybalion is not evil, it's not worthless. For many, it has been a doorway, a first taste of a bigger spiritual conversation, but that's exactly why it can be so subtly limiting. Half-truths are the most convincing because they feel almost complete. They contain enough wisdom to resonate deeply, but not enough to take you the whole way. The 7 principles can inspire curiosity, but if you mistake them for the entire Hermetic tradition, you risk building your spiritual house on a partial foundation. Over time, that foundation can become a ceiling, keeping you safe, but also keeping you from climbing higher. True Hermeticism and the wider mystical traditions it connects to were never designed to be quick, easy, or entirely explainable. They weren't written to be consumed in a single sitting or applied like a self-help checklist. They were and are paths of transformation that require time, humility, and surrender to the unknown. If the Kybalion has shaped your spiritual worldview, this isn't a call to reject it outright. It's an invitation to hold it lightly, to see it as one stepping stone among many. Let it point you toward deeper waters. The Corpus Hermeticum, alchemical texts, mystical poetry, and contemplative traditions that refuse to give you all the answers up front. Because here's the truth, awakening isn't about mastering the universe. It's about letting the universe master you. It's not about bending reality to your will. It's about being reshaped by a reality so vast that the mind can only bow in awe. If you've felt stuck, restless, or like you've reached the limit of what your current framework can offer, that's not failure. That's the call of the mystery itself, asking you to step beyond the comfort of neat laws and into the wild terrain of direct experience. The universe may be mental, but the mystery is not a mind trick. It's a mirror, and only when you stop trying to master it can it finally reveal you to yourself.